All right, we'll call the April 13th, 2026 council work meeting to order. On the agenda, fire apparatus discussion.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, just before we jump into this, we are having some technical difficulties with the go live option. It may go live, it may not. If you get emails from folks or texts from folks, we do have backup options so that we will be able to broadcast that tomorrow. They just may not be able to watch it real time here this evening, depending on whether it wants to cooperate or not. For the fire apparatus discussion, I want to thank yourself, Mr. Mayor, and Councilmember Miller for coming together and kind of Councilmember Smith, and addressing the fire apparatus issues, and we've kind of really worked through this for a good amount of time. I think we've come up with a reasonable path forward on this. And I have the fire chief here this evening to kind of give us a rundown on what the options are, and then leave it up to you folks to decide what you want to do. So,
Mayor, members of the council, thanks for.
let me switch over.
Sure. Thanks for having me back to continue this conversation. The last time that we were here, we presented the potential financing options for new apparatus. That was for 2 apparatus. After more talks with City Administrator Look, Mike in Finance, and Nate, we looked at another option, and we believe that it may be a potential better step forward. This would be for 1 apparatus. So we have a lease option that we can show you, and then we also have purchasing it outright, an option there. But the concern was brought up of having 2 apparatus that would still need to be replaced together in the future. Right now we have coupled apparatus, if you will, in engine 21 and 31. They were purchased together, so technically they would be up for replacement together. And if we did that again, we're not getting away from that. In 20 years, we'd still have 2 apparatus that need to be replaced again together. So we came up with a staggered solution, buying 1 in 27, 1 in 30, and then 1 in 33. That gives the city time to build up that CIP fund to where it should be funded in order to purchase these apparatus at the going rates. The CIP has been adjusted and will be shown to you in time to anticipate inflation for these rigs going forward. So this option that's before you is, well, if we go back to the 2 apparatus, let's see if I can, we were looking at the 10-year purchase for a lease. The payments were $237 and change and $243 and change at 4.89 and 4.91 respectively. We went back and asked them to do a purchase of 1 apparatus, and we did 7 and 10 years to show the difference. Again, this is one of the options. If we did go through the lease, if we did the second row here, our first payment wouldn't be due until April of 28, which again still gives us time to build up that CIP and that fund a little bit more. And then in talking with Mike, we were able to develop, Mike was able to develop a way to potentially purchase it and then increase the CIP in a yearly fashion. That'd be accurate? Yeah. This is purchasing 1 apparatus again. That is the way that I believe most of us feel we should go if we're going to go forward with purchasing an apparatus. Current funding, I think I'm down a little bit, aren't I? Current funding is $318 per year, and then it would go up by 14.5% each year after that to make up for the purchase of the vehicle and the depreciated value. Am I describing this correctly, Mike? Yep. Okay. It's a 5-year step program, if you will, to get to the fully funded for the CIP as laid out by both Public Works and the Fire Department. So I guess the recommendation has changed a little bit in the aspect of not asking for 2 apparatus, but 1 now and 1 in essentially 3 years, 3.5 years, and then the other one in 33. It extends the life of 21, which still has useful life under a 20-year replacement cycle. It does cut it a couple of years short, but it's not cutting it significantly short. And it again staggers that purchase for the big ticket items going forward.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, basically, just kind of throw the anchor out on that. Initially, we were kind of going into this saying that there's going to be some engine changes out there. There's going to be some costs added to it, and they were offering trucks with the current engines at a reasonable rate today. Okay. If we were to take advantage of that, we're buying 2 at the same time. They're going to age at the same time. We're going to kind of be caught in the same, having to replace 2 at the same time at some point in the future, which that gets very costly, as you can see. So throwing the anchor out here, is it your preference to stagger it as we're kind of presenting here? Would that be something you and the council would be more interested in as opposed to purchasing 2? Now, if we stagger it, when we buy the next one in 2030,
Yes. Yep.
that will have the new engine. You will end up having to pay more for that model. So there is let's say not a cost savings by postponing that purchase. But again, I think ideally, the best model out there is probably to stagger it, given the price of where these things have gone. Just having to come up and crack that nut times 2, gets rather expensive. So, anyways, like your input on that aspect alone.
My question is this going to affect the levy? Are we going to have to levy for some of this money in the future?
We will have to levy for an increase in the CIP, yes. So essentially just kind of to rewind a little bit, during COVID, a lot of dollars were made available by the federal government to local municipalities and counties. They could use those dollars to buy equipment such as this, and from what I understand, some of the equipment manufacturers may be in hot water for the amount of increase that they've had over the years. In other words, anytime you get the government involved, the costs always go up, it seems. But the price of these vehicles have tripled, if I'm not mistaken, in time that should not have tripled in. So the reality is you're in a marketplace right now where you're paying a lot more for a vehicle than you ever were before. And so when you look at the CIP that was established years ago and kind of trying to track with the times so that dollars will be in there when you need to replace it, but then the cost shoots way up, you obviously don't have the money in there to cover that. So the CIP doesn't have to be adjusted to account for these increases that we're seeing. Hopefully we're back to the normal 3 to 6% type of increases, but there were some huge spikes that the industry had to account for. So yes, long story short, we will have to adjust the levy to account for the change in the CIP dollars.
So my other issue is overlapping of payment, because we're going to pay for the first one for 5 years, but we're getting the second one in 3 years. So that's going to be like a overlapping of payment. So it's going to be double payment for a few years. Can we just pay one off and then get the other one and pay that off? That would be the ideal situation in my mind.
So essentially, as I understand the model right now, Mike, is we can utilize dollars in there to purchase this unit, or we can lease it, call it a lease to own, if you will, paying interest on this 10-year plan that you see right there. The difference between the two is a philosophical one. Do you want to burn cash that you have in hand that you're getting a 3% return on investment on? Or do you want to keep that cash in case it's needed for anything? And take out a lease for 4.89, so you're essentially paying 1.89% more interest than you would have gained on those dollars had you spent the dollars today.
Oh, I don't know if you could get a loan for 1.89.
No, the lease is 4.89,
Yep,
but
yeah.
we're getting three.
I understand the
basically. Yep,
difference. I'm just
yep.
saying that as if we were to go out and get a loan,
Right,
I don't think we'd get a loan for that low of a rate.
right. So that's the question. I mean, we don't know. There are dollars in there. There's not an infinite amount of money in the capital improvement budget right now. A lot of it has been planned for and prepared for parks and public works, and they've done kind of the model we're switching fire to now, which is a closer run model to what the costs are, and planning for that. And that's where we're going to need to put additional monies aside for future years to account for these eventual replacements. So the issue comes down to staggered. I think I saw some head nods that staggered might be the option. But then your second decision this evening would be, do you want to utilize the dollars that are in there today, making 3% interest, or do you want to do a 10-year payment plan for this piece of equipment, utilizing their money, paying that interest rate, and from what I understand, it's you can pay it off early if you want to.
I haven't seen a prepayment penalty, but I
Yeah.
will verify that. Again, these are quotes.
So potentially, we could pay it off early if it became a situation where we don't want these double payments and we have cash sitting there, and perhaps we've gotten more life out of our equipment that was due to be replaced, but we wouldn't replace it quite yet. We might be able to move some dollars around then and pay it off quicker. That's the options.
The apparatus, we have two apparatuses that we're looking at, but
Originally,
the one that we would be replacing,
Is the oldest.
would we be taking that one out of service and selling it?
that would be my recommendation.
Okay, so there would be some offset, because for
Yes.
whatever it sells for,
So what are they saying? You might get 100,000 out of it, ballpark?
The estimate is somewhere around $100,000 for that apparatus, that we don't have a buyer for it. If we decided to go through this route, HME, which is the company that's being proposed, says that they like to get all of that stuff ahead of time done. And essentially they'll, from my understanding, would have a purchase agreement on our engine done, so that as soon as our new one comes, engine 11 would leave our ownership and go to the new department.
there's a little bit of offset there, that little cushion. As far as answering one question, I think staggering is the way to go. So,
Staggering, definitely.
as long as,
Pro-staggering.
as long as these engines don't need to be replaced tomorrow, if they got another, 2 to 5 years left in them without major expenses.
Engine 21 and 31 both have 7 years of useful life left.
Okay,
So we would have been replacing one much earlier than we needed to. Again, that one, there was proposal to potentially keep that as a reserve engine because it did have useful life left in it. But this staggered plan does get more of that initial useful life out of that engine and keep it as a frontline engine and then replace it on a staggered deal.
So-
It goes out a couple of years before it's truly due for replacement, but it does get the city on a staggered purchase
Yeah.
plan going forward, so that in 20 years, we're not having a conversation of how to replace two apparatus again at the same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So best case scenario, we could possibly wait 7 years to replace a second one. Best case scenario.
We still have a third that's gonna be up in 7 years as well.
Mhm.
31's gonna eventually come up, and that would be the 33 purchase, which would be the second of the ones that were purchased in 13 together. If what I've understood from history, both 21 and 31 were purchased because there was a discount for purchasing them together. There was a good price that was to be had for that purchase, so that's why they were there. But, and just to get on the record, prices have doubled. In 2019, my previous department purchased an engine for, I believe it was $687,000, and that was an extremely expensive engine at that time. So since 2019 to now, that same engine is between $1.2 and $1.3 million. So in the course of 7 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is, it's gone up 100%. Now, it's not anticipated that that's going to continue, but
So I have a question regarding the two payment possibilities. Is there a total cost difference between those two? Like if we give the cash on hand and then the leasing option versus total leasing option, what's the bottom line and difference in total cost?
that number I didn't run.
Just run the 118,791 times 10. That'll give you your answer. So 1.18 million. 10.
Yeah, 1.18.
Yeah, 1.18 million, I guess, yeah, so you're talking, well, then you gotta subtract 900,000 to get it exactly.
So how many,
Approximately 287,910.
so how many years you estimating that we gotta jump this 14%?
The 14.5%.
That's 5 years, so you would jump at 14.5% for 5 years in order to cash flow it.
Roughly, just a little over 300,000 we'd be adding to the levy.
Yeah, so you'd be going, so for the first
Over 5 years, we'd have to
yeah,
add
for the first year,
300,000.
2027, you would be adding
First year would be like 45.
$46,000.
Yeah.
So which of
And that
those
would-
two payment methods saved us $1 million? Is that what? That's the one I think we need to go with.
The cheapest option is obviously to pay cash for it right up front, right?
Yes.
But if you finance it, you're not gonna pay 900,000 anymore, you're gonna pay the 1.18 million over time. So it's, how much is that, 100 and, let's just say,
287.
you're gonna pay, yeah, 287, so if you finance it, you're gonna pay $287,000 more. That'll be your interest charges
But
for the
then-
10-year period.
But if you pay for it up front, you forego your 3% return on investment today. So what does that calculate out? 240,000?
Right.
240,000, so it's really
The big,
about 50 grand. Call it 50 grand worth of difference.
and you're estimating what our interest is gonna be for the life of the 5-year period too. We don't know, we're in a declining market right now, so interest rates are trying to be driven down, but then there's other factors obviously influencing them to go back up, so we don't really know. This is locked in at the 4.89%. But overall, yes, if you were to buy it, the cheapest way to do it is to buy it outright, but obviously, like Matt says, that eats up cash, so the leasing option, again, is more expensive, but gives you more time to build up
So that fund at the end of the 5-year period will go from 318 up to 546.
Correct, yep, so 546 is really the target. If you were to fund this thing from day one, on the way we have it right now, if you were to fund this from day one in 2027, you'd wanna jump up your funding to 547,000. But we're saying, let's not do that, because that obviously is a lot to bite off in 1 year, so let's ratchet it up over that 5-year period to that $546,000 mark.
Yep.
So there's two decisions, right? There's there's a decision that you have to increase your CIP, right? That has to happen in order to purchase your next vehicle. But then there's the decision of, do you want to finance it, or do you want to pay cash? And the difference being is about $50,000.
Mike, let me ask you this, since you're the financial expert for the city here. What fits with what we're doing as a city better? What would work better or make you feel more comfortable knowing what we have coming in, going out, and how we're doing this?
It's a good question. So again, this is just one little component of your budget, right?
Right?
So essentially, there's two big components that we have. It's your salaries for your full-time staff, which has been locked in through the union agreement at 3%. And then you've got your police contract, which is the other big component of your budget, which estimates are around 4% right now. So just with those two items, we're looking at about a 4% increase. So if you're to have your CIP kind of fall in line with that, right, you'd want that to be in the 4% range, because then your levy naturally be 4%. The model that we have, that I left Jeff with, cash flows this cash purchase of the apparatus, and that increases your CIP by 14.5%. And although that's not gonna have the same weight as your police and your salaries, it is gonna mean that it's gonna go back over that 4% range. So your levy then would be, you know, in that 6 to 7% range for an increase. With all the kind of inputs and what we know right now, right?
And that doesn't even bring into like raising the capital for our buildings or nothing like that.
Yeah, I kind of, yeah, I mean, that's an open question too. So there's all these little pieces, right? But if you wanted to keep your levy at 3%, then all these little pieces, you should be eyeballing a 3% increase in all of them. If you're not comfortable with 3%, then you need to eyeball for all these little component pieces something much smaller than that then. But once you have one of these pieces coming in at 14.5%, which is kind of the model that we left it at, then that puts pressure on that 3% to go above and beyond that. So it is really kind of a levy increase tolerance that the governing board, kind of up to the governing board to say kind of what their levy increase tolerance is.
It's a tolerance, but I think it's also a right sizing of, you know, if we don't address the building deferred maintenance issues this year, which I wouldn't recommend this year, you'll have to address it next year. And if you address the CIP this year, then, you know, you're right sizing that CIP. You're correcting for known or unknown forces that have caused it to be imbalanced. For the building deferred maintenance part of it, we've never had a study done on what's the age of our boilers and our ACs and, you know, roofs and parking lots and all that sort of thing. Having that study done, I think, as we talked earlier, is a roadmap to this is known expenses that you're gonna have. We have, about $2.5 million worth of deferred maintenance over the next, Mayor, I forget, is it 5 years or?
Yeah, 5 years.
5 years. So if that's a true statement, if you have $2.5 million worth of known expenses that you're gonna have to pay for, we were putting away $50,000 a year for building fund, kind of work, like replacing carpet or painting walls, little things. We should have been building up a CIP for that, right, to manage these known expenses now that are coming. And so you have to right-size that at some point. I just wouldn't right-size it this year because otherwise you'll have a huge levy, which I don't think folks will appreciate very much, so. Nothing's free, it's weird. Especially in the fire business, wow. Anyways.
So basically all on us, basically on what we're comfortable with the levy figure.
All of this, of course, is offset by commercial industrial development, which housing development. Some of that's going to be coming online and will help to offset some of that because more revenue will be coming in based on the new units coming online, but that takes a little while to build that, so.
So Mike, which scenario increases the levy the least amount?
It would be the least option because we wouldn't have to ratchet it up. But it would be the most expensive option, but it would be the one that allows for the ratcheting up of your transfers at a slower rate.
Yeah, and
And that's kind of deviates from what we've done in the past. This was set up to kind of cash flow those items, right? So that we didn't have to get into these lease agreements. And then kind of going back to Suzanne's question and concern about double payments and having things on the books. And then, so it does get becomes a lot more complicated, obviously, to manage when you have these agreements like that. Because then you gotta have those play into it, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of considerations in this, so.
and with this lease agreement, it's mandatory to get the second one in 3 years?
It wouldn't be mandatory, that would be the suggested route to get them on a 20-year plan.
I'm just thinking, I probably won't be here in 3 years, but my thought is, well, what if something comes up and we need money for a big amount of money for something else, then we could put it off, but I wanted to make sure it's not tied into a lease where we have to buy it, no matter what.
No.
Okay,
I think the whole reason why this CIP was set up was to avoid leasing or equipment certificates or all these other things that can be.
Bonding.
Finding ways to pay for stuff.
Yeah, finding, Nate has kind of said it all along, we budgeted for it all along, and it's time to be replaced, the money's been budgeted for, the money's there, it's easy to kind of make that purchase, right? And that doesn't mean that it automatically gets purchased, but then you don't have to go through all these machinations. Could you imagine kind of managing the next thing that comes in, okay, now we got this lease, and then, okay, now let's lease this one, it becomes very cumbersome in order to do that. So that's, I think, why the whole reason why this was set up the way it was. It's just very simple.
And
We're gonna pay cash for everything.
And that's the best management practice. Unfortunately, the clock's been run on this topic.
Yeah, back in the day when this was all set up, if
Yeah.
fire apparatus would only increase by 5% each year, not 18 to 24.
And plus, there was the 20 to 30. There was this belief that they'll last for 30 years, when in fact it's more likely 20 now. So, especially in this salty environment. But
I'm thinking with the 10-year lease and with the revenue coming into the city, hopefully we can pay that off before the 10 years and
right.
purchase another truck actually once that's paid off, so we don't double payment stuff.
sometimes we have budgets, at the end of the year which are not totally expended. those usually go back into the next year's budget discussion, but that might be a possibility for an early payment, extra payment, something like that.
Even going with the 10-year plan, we still gotta look at increasing the CIP somewhere,
Right.
and at what rate?
I don't think you can get away from that one.
Nope,
That one's,
I don't think we'll be fighting this every year.
you don't want to set future councils up for the same discussion that's being had.
Like we've been set up.
Well, that's why we did that survey on the properties of the city.
Right.
Wanted to know what we were facing or what any future council might face down the road.
It's not uncommon to kick cans down the road for councils, so it's usually a little easier to do that than to make the hard decision, but these are hard decisions, there's no question about it.
The proposed plan to purchase one now, one in 30 and one in 33 is a proposed plan. It can be modified. We are trying to come into best practice, get the most use out of our apparatus while also coming onto a staggered plan, getting the CIP to where it needs to be for the purchase of our major equipment within the fire department. Nate has done a great job on the public works side, so we're trying to match his work. Does that mean that they have to be purchased in that area? No. Back to Councilmember Urkel's point, can the next one be in 32, which gives 5 years, 6 years to build up that CIP a little bit better, and then instead of 33, is it 34 for the next one? They're a little bit closer maybe than we want them to be, but it does give time for that CIP to be increased a little bit more. There's ways to work it. Again, the now, or the 27, 30, and 33 is a proposal.
It's just a fluid plan, not set in stone.
Correct. Now, we can't wait until something breaks and then say, okay, well, now we have to purchase it. That's the other part of this. If an engine goes down right now, that means that there's not a fire engine in that station. It's not you go to the dealer and just buy one type deal. Not typically. You can. Typically, you're settling for what's on the showroom floor type deal. But the timeline can be adjusted as needed. Again, it's a proposal to fall in line with what we're trying to get in.
Yeah, I think we should do the lease option personally.
I agree.
Anything to save on the levy.
Because we don't want to get rid of the cash that we have either in case we need it.
And obviously, we don't know what the purchase price or the value of engine 11 is. That is not currently in this. So to Councilmember Mundell's point, that could potentially offset some of this.
Could be
What-
an early payment, yep.
What that ultimately means, I don't know. I'm not I can't run numbers quite as fast as Mike does and as specific as he does, but
Well, that might offset what we raise the CIP to too. That would help.
correct. So
We could move that forward back into the CIP and increase a certain amount right there just through that.
Is it any less expensive to purchase something that's not totally brand new off the right from the manufacturer, used, 2 or 3 years old? Is that ever an option, or are those costs looked at?
there are used apparatus out there. There are typically costs that come with that. There's a reason that it's back on the market. Now, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it, but a lot of due diligence and research would have to be done to make sure that that apparatus doesn't need $100,000 or $200,000 in refurbishment or repairs
Of
or
course.
something else. That is an option. I have not explored that option, but I could.
And I'm not talking about for the first one, but I am thinking maybe for the second one, that might be an option to get something just a little bit older to reduce the cost for the, especially if we're gonna have to overlap.
We can look at that.
It could be explored.
What kind of warranty comes with the new ones?
I believe the HME is a 3-year warranty. Again, there's been some advancements in the frame technology. They're using galvanized frames versus the painted and powder coated frames. So that's supposed to help with the rust and the rust jacking that we talked about the last time. But I believe HME is offering a 3-year warranty with it.
Yeah, I think we gotta almost go with the lease. And then the CIP issue we'll have to address towards in the budget part somehow.
Yeah, I agree too. I think the leasing is gonna have the least amount of impact on our residents while protecting them at the same time. We can make some money back on the engine that we sell. I think maintenance has got a lot to do with our equipment in this city. I know we keep very good care of our equipment, and I think that almost has to stay at that level or go up to maintain that stuff if we're gonna let it last a year or two longer. I worry a little bit about buying a used one because of the maintenance factor and what's been done to it and what it needs. It might need more than what we can anticipate, but I like the idea.
Well, it's just there's rich communities that
Oh, yeah.
replace them every year just because they can.
And I think it's a good idea to look into it.
Well, and if we can verify the maintenance has been done, if there's records, I mean, it's something that can definitely be looked into. And if there's records to justify, yep, it's been maintained by a reputable company year in and year out, and
Right. I expect
there might be a
that.
way to verify it. But there's a couple of places that I know sell reconstructed apparatus, I'll put it that way. That's not necessarily the ones you always want to try and go after.
Understood.
So we pretty much have a consensus, sounds like.
Yep.
All right.
I guess I would just suggest that we put that on the next agenda then. I don't necessarily know, get it on this agenda, but the next agenda for approval, so you can go ahead and purchase order for this. I think
Okay.
like we need to get that in by the end of the month, is that?
Yeah,
Communicate with them.
yeah, I'll continue communicating with the manufacturer and make sure we're staying on their timeline, and making sure it's all gonna work.
Sounds good.
And then you and I can work to get the CIP updated to this latest model, and then it'll kick out the new levy or the transfer cost.
Okay, and then I'll figure out the sale price part of it as well, and we'll have a better view of what that looks like, and we can even get the lease payment options updated with what our quote-unquote down payment would be, or our available cash would be to put down on it.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you, chief. Thanks for all the time you put in with this.
Yep, you and Mike both.
Yeah, Mike and Nate.
I'm sure Nate was involved.
Yeah.
All right, I've got one quick item, guys. This came to me last time. Well, this was an email. This is the same guy that facilitated the letter for the mayor to sign and everything earlier this year. I got all the publicity. But this one, I believe I can support fully, being this paid family leave is part of our budget, $24,000 in our budget, and it is mandated. got that clarified by Mike today. So if this is something you want me to sign, I'll sign it. But it's put on by the same guy that facilitated the first letter that went out. The letter itself that he's facilitating is on the second page. The first page is the email he sent me. So this one I think I could support because it did affect our budget.
I'm all for it.
As it doesn't need to be signed until the deadline Wednesday, May 13th.
Right.
Can we have this on the next agenda so we get some time to review?
Yeah, it's just up to you guys. This one I can back on this one. The
Yeah.
first one I didn't because a lot of stuff they said in there wasn't mandated.
Yeah,
This,
if you think you can support it, I would be inclined to support it. Just want a chance to review it.
yep. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. It came to me last night.
Great.
All right, that's all I got. Yep. This time we'll close the work session.